on a piece of tape on the ceiling, and especially maybe above our beds, glow in the dark for those sleepless nights when we just can't get to sleep, mulling over those problems. Then when we hit a difficult time in our life, all we'd have to do is look up. I call this sermon The Idiot's Guide to Christianity. It's a takeoff, of course, on all those Idiot's Guide books out there. I think I can remember the first one. I think it all started with computers back when I was just beginning, and as a pastor, I think it's the Idiot's Guide to DOS or something like that, but now there's just so many of them. The Idiot's Guide to the Internet, the Idiot's Guide to Auto Repair, the Idiot's Guide to Selling Your House yourself. There's so many questions that, people have, and they want the easy answers to them. But there are some basic questions, some real questions, and all of us do need the answers to some of those. Christian author Max Lucado visited New York City a few days after the September 11, 2001. Riding around the city, he asked the taxi driver how his life had changed since the World Trade Centers were bombed. The driver replied, "I keep getting lost." He explained that he always was able to look up at the World Trade Towers no matter where he was, and he'd get his bearings. Couldn't do that anymore. He said, "I can't get my bearings anymore." Now, many of us, we can relate to that in so many ways. After a sudden tragedy, we just can't get our bearings anymore. Oh, but there was an answer, just taped to the ceiling. I'm not going to try and answer for you, and it's not my purpose to answer all of your questions today, and I couldn't if I wanted to. But I want to deal with two of the biggest, most important questions. Suppose we were asked to get together and write The Idiot's Guide to Christianity. Where would you begin? Well, we could begin with our gospel lesson for today. In it, we find two essential themes, two essential points, two essential elements to the Christian faith. Thus, the Idiot's Guide to Christianity would basically be in two sections. Section 1, to the Idiot's Guide to Christianity, would carry this heading: when you see Jesus, you see God. Simple enough. When you see Jesus, you see God. In our gospel lesson for today, Jesus says, "He who receives me receives the one who sent me." When you receive Jesus, you receive God. We believe that in the life and teachings of Jesus and his resurrected presence, we discover everything we need to know about God. What is God like? Look to Jesus. Does my life matter? Look at what Jesus says about all the people whom Jesus loves. Another question people have: what happens to us when we die? Well, look at the life of the resurrected Jesus. It was 40 days he was here on earth, walking, talking, eating with his friends. When you see Jesus, you see God. Two guys met in college. They were both business majors, but they really liked art. Every elective that they had, they took in art. And neither of them were really good at art, but they just loved painting. They both, upon graduation, tried to support themselves as painters. And, well, they failed gloriously, but they had a great time doing it. And one entered business and did very, very well. He loved to paint, and, well, his most prized painting, his last painting, was a painting he did of his 6-year-old son before his son died after battling cancer. But he kept working, kept making money, and kept collecting more art. The friend remained close, and he tried to support himself painting, and it was a meager but enjoyable existence. And they were friends through it all. When the one who had the huge art collection died, his collection was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and the friend showed up for the auction out of respect, and He also got a kick out of meeting all these important people in the art world and being a good friend of the deceased. He belonged there among them. And, well, I also know that stereotypes are bad, and mentioning them in a sermon, just plain wrong, but I'm retired. What are you going to do? Artist people have a reputation. None of the good people here at Christ the King of being a bit uppity and snobby and all that. And I mention this because the auction began with the auctioneer saying, according to the will of the deceased, the first painting will be of his son. Now, all those fancy, well-known art collectors there who could afford to buy their way into $1 million auction, they let it be known with their comments and body language that it was beneath them to be asked to bid on some pedestrian painting. Well, the friend noticed this, and he started bidding, and he was the only one bidding. He bid against himself, even got it up to where he was spending all his money on the painting, and he had the painting, and he was happy for himself. Did it out of respect for his friend. The auctioneer closed the books and said the auction is over. Now all those uppity people, well, they were belligerent, demanding to bid on all the rest. The auctioneer said, according to the deceased, the one who gets the son gets it all. When you see Jesus, you see God. It's the first half of The Idiot's Guide to Christianity. The second, when you see your neighbor, you see Jesus. That's simple too. If we want to know how to treat our neighbor, ask ourselves, if that person was Jesus, how would I treat that person? And then act accordingly. In our lesson for today, Jesus says, and whoever gives to one of the little ones a cup of cold water to drink, truly I tell you, that person will not lose the reward. A cup of cold water. Let me tell you a fascinating but true story of history. During the 2nd and 3rd centuries in the Mediterranean world, there were a series of terrible, devastating plagues at the time. Now, since this was in time when the Christian church was in its infancy, trying to grow, you'd think the Christian church would have just died out. People would have said, you want to talk to me about God? What kind of God would allow this to happen? Strangely enough, this was a time of great Christian growth. People flocked to the Christian faith because they noticed that the Christians seemed to be surviving the plagues greater than the general population. I mean, this is just true history of the Mediterranean world at the time. Now, the reason for the better survival rate was not that God was saving the Christians and ignoring all the rest of the folk. The reason was that the Christians were taking seriously Jesus' word to share a cup of water. While all the other people were pulling away from the sick and the dying, the Christians were going in. The Christians were ministering to the sick and the dying. Now, for many of the sick and the dying, that loving act, that sharing a cup of water, sharing a meal, someone taking care of them, that was enough to keep their strength up, and they lived. Now, a large number of Christians died in this activity of caring for the sick and the dying for these centuries, but so many more lived. This was a big part of the growth of the Christian faith at the time. The help that the saints gave to all those people was just enough for so many of them to keep their strength going, whether it was physical, mental, or spiritual at the time. They were able to weather the storm. Jesus says, whoever gives to one of these little ones even a cup of cold water, such shall not lose the reward. Taken in the context of Jesus' total teachings about love for God and love for people, we're on solid ground saying that any time we do any good for another human being, we're ministering to Jesus. Who can forget Matthew, the 25th chapter? Jesus says, I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then all those asked Jesus, Lord, when did we see you hungry, thirsty, stranger, naked, sick, or in prison? Inasmuch as you have done it to the least of these, you have done it unto me. When you look in the face of your neighbor, you are looking at Jesus. The way that you would treat Jesus is the way that you should treat your neighbor, with respect, with consideration, with kindness, with caring. It's a tall order, but it's Jesus' order. It's Jesus' one command. Love one another as I have loved you. The Idiot's Guide to Christianity. Well, it's got two parts. When you see Jesus, you see God. When you see your neighbor, you see Jesus. One of my favorite books is by Dostoevsky. It's called The Idiot. The central character in this novel is Prince Mishkin, and he does not fit into society around him. His peers are striving for status and power, and they judge each other on the basis of money and appearance, and, well, not involved in the family connection in that society. And in their world, there's no real friendship. There's no intimacy at all. People use each other to meet their own needs. And into this world comes Prince Mishkin. And he doesn't understand the world. He doesn't get it. He treats everyone, whether rich or poor, with respect, kindness. He has no hidden agenda. He doesn't in any way seek to dominate other people. He's pure in thought, word, and deed. And, well, all the other people, they call him an idiot. All these empty, cynical people, status-seeking people, while they're calling him that, they're strangely drawn to him. And it's not because of his money or his power, but it's through the strength of his character. The idiot. St. Paul tells us to be fools for Christ. Wish we could all be idiots for Christ in that way. So our Idiot's Guide to Christianity is complete. 2 sections. When you see Jesus, you see God. When you see your neighbor, you see Jesus. And then my little input would be, I'd like to have a form in the back. You know, pastors like forms in the back. It's something we do, and it'd be a commitment form. It's something else pastors do. And everyone who read the book would be asked to fill out the form. And could you treat everyone you meet as if they were Jesus? That's what Jesus tells us to do. Could you treat your neighbor, everyone you meet, as if they were Jesus? If you were asked to fill out such a form, would you do it? Could you become an idiot for Christ? Treat everyone, whether rich or poor, with respect and kindness. Have no hidden agenda. No need to dominate other people. Be pure in thought, word, and deed. This may make you a fool in someone else's eyes, but at the same time, those empty, cynical, status-seeking people, well, all those people strangely drawn now to the Christian faith when Christians treat others with kindness. This is the Christian witness that's needed in Miami. It's the witness that's needed in America. It's the Christian witness needed in the world. Amen.